So you have the roll call of everybody who's here. You're all set? Cool. So can we just move old business up as the first item? If you all agree to it, sure. Okay, is that good? So we can talk to these two guys and this is
okay.
This is Aaron and Brian.
Nice to meet you, Aaron.
Brian, you're
I'm from Beard Brewing.
you also.
I know I own the cheese company, Mystic Cheese Company.
I see. Oh, well, okay. Glad that I've heard about the cheese company and finally.
I bet somebody from the cheese company.
Very, very good. Okay, I have drunk your beer.
Fantastic. That's
I
even
may
better.
not eat your cheese.
That's even better. Fantastic.
okay. So we have 3 votes to move old business up to first item so that we can, and then we'll go back to our regular agenda. Now, I'm not quite sure how we want to structure this. So, do you want to begin, Greg, or?
Sure, I'll just give a brief overview and then I really wanted to have Brian and Aaron give their presentation. I know we submitted their written plans to you that they submitted to us on June 24th, which is within the time period specified in the letter. Right. How they're going to side stream and reduce their waste loads. So you had a chance to look at that, but I thought it'd be best if they come in and explain it, and then if you have questions, just so that you guys can say, yes, this looks great, and move forward with that. And then talk about time frame. They did both, I believe, submit, their intent was to submit for ARPA funds,
Yes.
which is the American Rescue Plan funds that the town has. We did provide a letter of support to them from myself, department, and also on your behalf. Right. That process is going to take a few months, so they probably won't see any money till, I'm guessing, the end of the year. It has to go through a whole review committee, then it goes to the town council. But from what I hear, it's very likely, because it has to do with sewer, which is one of the high priorities on the list. Most likely they'll get approved for that fund. Right. I'd be shocked if it didn't, to be honest.
Great.
So, with that, I think, I don't know if you want to, who wants to kind of go first?
Sure. I mean, I can get the ball started here. Again, Aaron Simonini from the Beard Brewing Company down here in Groton. I've been in business for about 10 years. Our original location is in Stonington, Connecticut, just about half the size of what we're operating here in Groton at 225 Leonard Drive. Essentially, since the first contact, with the town, I wanted to make sure, being that it's my second time through, that we were going to be good to go as far as all of the approvals, all of the zoning, all of the planning, all the building construction, as well as wastewater. So I believe I was working with Christian Lund at my first kind of reach out and interaction with the town, and we kind of laid out a very informal plan with him. However, he did say, you know what, this is going to be acceptable. Let's move forward. So with his blessing, we did move forward. And then at some point during essentially after construction, I believe we opened in 2018. Does that sound about right, when we kind of started operating in the building? In 2018, I believe what happened is I had an employee who had an out-of-spec batch of beer that essentially just let it rip straight to the sewage system, which is a big no-no. Certainly aware of that, and I believe that's where we first met Harry. Yes, sir.
So the question is that the occasion where you said there was a smell of beer at the sewage plant?
Yep.
I see. So this is not an ongoing thing. It was a one-time oops.
So as far as that particular instance, yes. And since that date, we have had one out-of-spec batch of beer, which we've actually sent to a distiller, which they're able to repurpose it, because it's not bad. It's just not to flavor profile for beer. So they were able to turn it into gin, which is fantastic. We actually side streamed it to Sons of Liberty out of Kingston, Rhode Island, and they were able to take the entire batch of beer in one go instead of sending it down the drain.
Now that's conservation.
Exactly. We want to make sure that if we're making alcohol, we're getting it into somebody's glass.
Right.
and certainly not the sewer. So I believe that was where our first interaction with Harry occurred, and we identified an issue. So some ongoing testing and sampling went on at the Manway in the street at 225, which unfortunately commingles the Mystic Cheese Company and my waste effluent streams. So we don't know exactly where the high strength effluent might be coming from, if it is certainly an ongoing or if it's kind of a intermittent thing.
I hate to be snarky, but
No, sure.
didn't it occur to anybody that you should separately identify the streams from two different things?
Absolutely. And while I find myself a professional, whether it's through trial by fire in many things, or just research and schooling, I went to school for finance and accounting. I own a brewery now, so I'm in business, but I don't know a ton about construction. So when our landlords, who are actually the building owners, went through the planning process and got the connection permit, it was approved as such, and so I didn't have any
So the
question.
landlords, you can blame it on.
I hate to lay blame elsewhere, but yeah, it's not because I don't own the building, and they just kind of vanilla box it for us. That's unfortunately the way that it happened. In hindsight, obviously we would want 2 sewer laterals so that we can, and in hindsight, I would want to have a monitoring well so that we can actually say what's going down the drain, as opposed to utilizing the incoming water for a process, which ultimately ends up a large proportion of it at fever going out the door. So we're levied surcharges against the incoming water rather than what's going down the sewer. So hindsight 2020, right? I approve.
Yeah, so now with this whole business about whether the COD should be 3 or 4 or 5 ppm, and or is that, have I got the numbers right? Anyway, it was different. What the threshold for worry
Mhm.
and you or maybe your council remarked that the numbers we use are more stringent than a lot of other places.
So I don't know if you're referring to Brian's counsel, because I'm not privy, but I did hire a consultant right out of the gate.
Consultant.
Yep. And he's worked with, municipalities around the country as well as in Canada on a number of these things. And his remarks were specifically, and I do have a copy of that letter, I believe, here somewhere. His remarks were that the thresholds for industrial users were rather low, based on his findings of other municipalities throughout Connecticut. In fact, he did find that only one other municipality in Connecticut, specifically Hartford, seemed to have a similar high-strength industrial user surcharge formula, both dating back to 1985 when this one was put into the statutes.
Now, I was wondering about, I'm a scientist. I believe in getting to the bottom of things.
I agree.
And it struck me that there should be somewhere a gigantic tome which has exactly what the criteria in BOD and COD is for everybody in the country. And apparently this guy didn't consult it, or there isn't one.
You're referring to the engineer from 1985 or my consultant?
I'm referring to the fact that this is a legal requirement, I guess.
Yes.
You think, legal things somebody compiled somewhere, you'd think,
Certainly.
and nobody has.
Yeah, so what the town's BOD, COD, and TSS levels and limits are set upon is household waste. And anything above and beyond that, in fact, the formula does not give credit for the initial charge of what is accumulated based on household waste, as if we just had toilets. And so further, and I know, Harry, you're going to have something different to say here, but further, we're being charged for a process that is treating for the same thing. So essentially, wastewater, to my knowledge, again, not a professional, but learned by trade and trial by fire, is treated through bubbling air, oxygen, to feed the organisms to consume the waste, correct?
Actually, there's 2 processes.
Yep.
There's the anaerobic, where we put it into a tank that has no oxygen whatsoever,
Mhm.
and we get everything we can out of that, and then we put it into the aerator thing. So there's two separate things.
So there's a BOD and a COD, but both oxygen demand, correct?
Well, I don't know about that, and I was gonna ask, I was hoping you'd have an answer.
So that, at least that's what I'm told by the person that I paid a very large sum of money to tell me about my situation.
Well, but what I assumed was that the BOD is measured with bugs, and the COD is measured with chemicals.
Sure.
It's not what the nature of it is, it's how you find out what it is.
And that's exactly, so
Yeah.
typically what you'll find is BOD is going to be about half the rate of COD. And so, yep, so almost, I mean, even if you look at the numbers and the reports from the town as well as our reports, which I have more from a private engineering firm who tested just our facility, you'll generally see about a double rate from BOD to COD. But again, and Harry, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's typically treated with oxygen introduction so that we can get the bugs to do what they're doing and remove all.
Why do they need to measure both?
Okay, can I interrupt?
Okay, yes.
We need some sort of process here and so forth, so I appreciate your questions, but, so maybe you could just summarize what you're doing to reduce the strength and control the strength of the effluent, and then any requests you have of us, and then we can hear from Brian for Mr. Cheese, and then we can go to. I'd like to check on comments from Harry or Greg, and then we all do questions. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, thanks. We don't usually have outside people here, so.
No worries, that's okay. Well, we're
to
happy to
make
be a
that
part of it. I know I
process
speak for myself,
as
but I'm
we
sure
go.
Brian agrees. So first and foremost, you have to identify the source of high strength effluent, correct? And that is essentially yeast, which consumes oxygen. That's going to present a very high load of TSS, as well as spent hops. Which is going to be, again, a very high load of TSS. And then on top of that, we've got our protein coagulate, or TRUB is what it's called in my industry, which is essentially the protein that coagulates out of the boiling process. Beer is also very high in BOD and COD. So, but at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is to make sure that ends up in a can or a keg or a glass. So that's the sources. Now, how do we reduce it? We have to go in and we have to collect and essentially not let anything hit the floor other than wash water, which falls within specs for, or at least closer to, it's never going to be household strength. It's just not going to happen, but a lot closer to. So we've identified a lot of the low-hanging fruit. And as I said, and believe it or not, there's 3 of you, 3 copies here. Perfect. I printed enough. So I've been working with the Connecticut DEP extensively, not only as my position for the Connecticut Brewers Guild president, but also personally attentive to this. I am the president of the Connecticut Brewers Guild, correct? And so for my industry, because we're certainly not the only ones running into this issue, but also selfishly for myself, because we want to do the right thing. I've worked with DEEP, and they've come in recently, did some sampling of our effluent strengths, and they've come together with some, and I just had this meeting with them last week, some best management practices as to how to go ahead and reduce these impacts on those. So
I see. Did they give you anything that you hadn't been doing?
So yes, we have not been side streaming, and side streaming is a very broad process, but essentially it means taking the high strength effluent and parking it somewhere else. So we're currently collecting, which has already started, we're currently collecting as much of the high strength effluent as we can in what's called an IBC tote. It's a 350-gallon plastic container inside of a cage that's forkliftable. And we're working with Blue Earth Composting, which is a Hartford-based outfit that essentially does curbside as well as commercial for universities and large establishments. But they are hauling our waste to Quantum Bioenergy out of Southington, Connecticut, for reuse in their process to create energy.
So ultimately, it's going into good practice.
Correct. Yep. I explored a couple of different options. This seems to be the least financially impactful.
Uh-huh. Very good. It's called research.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, anything else you want to add?
So you did mention any requests of the WPCA, and I know I put it in writing a number of times, but to be able to look at the formula that's levied against not just my industry, but also industrial users, it seems abnormally high comparatively to other municipalities in the area, as well as other states. And so I think that kind of doing a rate study on that might make a lot of sense. And then just one final comment is I don't know, and I don't want to spring this on anyone, but there was a new House Bill 5331 that went through, and it specifically pertains to brewing industry and WPCA wastewater charges.
So this is Congress.
This is the state. Yep, state.
State.
Yep, state. So the first page there is the layman's terms, and then the next page. So as of this October, they're basically saying that if, and I think, again, I'd need a lawyer to look at this, but I think that it reads as if we were to revise or put in a new surcharge for the brewing industry. It's essentially saying that we have to eliminate the fact that we use a lot of water and levy a surcharge based on other factors.
Other things.
So it doesn't really change a lot, but it changes the way we look at it.
Now, when you say it,
Okay, wait. So let's come back to those things.
That was the end of my comment.
is this now a law or is it still?
It is. It was signed in May of this year.
Okay. Brian, you
Yes.
want to tell us about Mystic Cheese?
Sure. Mystic Cheese Company, we've been in business for 10 years now, transforming Connecticut milk into cheese. We moved to the town of Groton along with Aaron, splitting a building on 225 Leonard Drive. We were previously operating in Lebanon, Connecticut prior to moving to Groton. We kind of transformed milk into cheese. So we haul milk from farms up in Ledyard, Preston, Voluntown, and also one in Rhode Island. And we bring it down to the factory, we pasteurize the milk and create cheese right there. When we create cheese, we do create some waste stream. So when we separate the curds, which would be the solid part of the cheese, with the whey, which is the liquid portion, the whey becomes our effluent. And that's possibly what's causing problems down at the plant for Harry. We do have a flow into a grease trap. So we do extract quite a bit of the solids and we pump that out of the grease trap, which is 2,000 gallons. We pump it like 3 times more than we're required to, just to help clear out the waste in there. But as part of this project, we're going to be side streaming the whey into a container. We're actually contracted with the same person Aaron is to help with the shipping costs and things like that. Once they're coming to one location, it's much easier for us
so
to
it's
do that.
going to this place which recycles it as something that helps the green.
Correct. It'll be composted. This company that we're giving it to composts it.
Compost.
Yeah.
So maybe so it becomes fertilizer, or you just.
You can break it down into energy, or they can compost it. He said with ours, they're looking to try and compost it.
Whereas mine is becoming energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 2 alternatives. One was this location, and if something happens with this particular vendor, we have a pig farmer we can work with locally. The challenge with a pig farmer is that their demand can vary, and so it's not as consistent of a source for us to be able to dispose of. We'd love to be able to give it to the farms, but sometimes they can take it and sometimes they can't, and sometimes it's a last minute thing, which would leave us hanging with a bunch of side stream stuff, and then it would end up in the sewer at that point, rather than collecting on the sidewalk. So we applied for some ARPA funds to help us get the equipment to be able to side stream. The cheese industry is as or more regulated than the pharmaceutical industry. The FDA has a particular interest in how cheese is made because it can be dangerous if it's not made correctly. Even though we think their overreach is a bit much, we see a federal agent every 1 to 2 months. And they can spend anywhere from 5 to 7 days with us, watching us do every little task. So,
What scares me about that is the pharmaceutical industry needs to be more
correct,
regulated.
yeah, we're just making cheese. So we have to have all of our plans for handling waste stream in the plant approved by the FDA and the local Department of Agriculture prior to installation. So
So that has been done.
it has been done. They are okay with what we submitted for the ARPA plan. I don't have any half measure. We had come up with a half measure prior to being able to put in what we could do with ARPA. But they deemed it not sanitary enough for them.
I see. So you are working now, but it's still a work in progress.
We have to wait for the ARPA funds to put everything into action.
But you are at the present time making cheese.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we are continuing to make cheese as of right now, yeah. We employ 5 full-time cheesemakers, and we have about six to seven, depending on the season, part-time people, including drivers to deliver cheese, drivers, milk trucks. So we have a lot of people employed at the company.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And I have lots of questions.
Sure.
I'm just holding on to them. But I want to ask, Harry, and if he wants to make any comments now, or if you want to wait till later, whatever. But I want to give you the opportunity.
Do you have any questions for me? I mean, I can answer questions that you have.
Okay, if you'd rather do it that way, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that everybody got an opportunity to give input to us.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Do you have something? No, I guess not, right? No, just a couple of comments. I know we've been talking to Aaron and Brian about this, but the ordinance as it's written right now, I have to charge them based on the water usage unless they have a flow meter installed, and it's up to them to put it in. It specifically says that's what I have to do, so I have no other way other than charging them full water usage until they get this flow meter. And I understand beer takes a ton of water to make beer. I'm sure that's where a good percentage of it goes, but until we get that flow meter, then my hands are kind of tied. Regarding the formula, and I think Harry would back me up on this. I mean, I disagree with the analysis that's flawed. It does take into account the household, the 200, 400, 200, because it shows it as a ratio. It takes that number, like if you plug in the limits into the formula, the factor comes out as 1, which is what you would expect. Anything over that is going to be an additional charge. So it's a ratio. It's 2/5 is flow, which there's no increase for that. But if the DOD, COD, or TSS goes above the limits, it's 1/5 of each one of those. So if you just take some random numbers, plug them in, you see that it actually works, and it does account for the household 200, 400, 200 limits that we already have. I did actually look at Mr. Mercer's formula, and if you plug in the numbers, it actually goes to 0. If you work out the math of it, so you actually end up only having 2/5 times your rate. So what he's suggesting really doesn't work. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. If you want, we can go into more detail if you like, but that's my opinion. We did get a quote for price from Bustonian in the Yard. Harry's working with Ty and Bond, another consultant that has done a lot of work on rate studies in the state to really take a look into see if see if these numbers can be tweaked as they should be. So we'll come back to you once we get that information. But we are working on that. But they typically look at the residential stuff, not so much these industrial forms, but we'll specifically focus on that.
Okay.
I could add a couple of comments.
Sure.
I know I listened to the presentation, and there seemed to be almost like an innocence about the whole situation, which I really have to comment on. That we found, as I probably said before, we found out about this issue because of a Sunday night dump or a weekend dump, which is a classic industry move. You know, and the expense is driven by the air demand. You're right that the bacteria need to digest the sewage. It's driven by the air demand, which is very expensive, and that drives a significant amount of that fee. You know, I am glad that 4 years later, we're finally getting somewhere with it. You know, we pulled hops out of the sampler. So I don't know. I mean, there didn't seem to be a lot of effort on side streaming or even much concern of what was going down the drain in those initial days. So I just want to point that out, because the letter says you, in searching for an area to open, you considered sewer use and the fees. So I'm surprised we end up here. So that's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you. So let's do this. Do you have questions? Okay, Dave, I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I'll see what questions you have, and then we'll see what questions any of the rest of us have. So actually, Greg, I'm going to start with this rate study. Sort of what's the time frame for that?
We should have, I'm hoping we can get it signed by the end of this month, so probably a couple months, so like October, November.
So you're putting a contract into place, and then they have to carry it out.
Actually go over
Okay.
work.
Okay,
I'll give a couple months for that.
okay. I mean, I think that, to me, there's kind of several issues around the rate. I mean, one is obviously that the how things stack up against different towns. Having said that, you know, one of the challenges that I think we're all aware of with offering things like, you know, tax breaks and stuff to try to bring in industrial growth is that you just run into this sort of race to the bottom where everybody's competing to give the most incentives, and that's not ideal either. So just because other people aren't charging doesn't necessarily mean to me that we shouldn't be charging. But I certainly want to know sort of what the situation is and sort of how it stacks up against others. And so I do think this rate study, I didn't know whether you needed us to make a motion to go forward, but it sounds like you're just going forward with that. I was certainly prepared to support that we would, you know, if he needed a motion.
Are you actually surveying other states and the federal government about these rates, or where are you getting your input from?
Most likely, it'll probably be like, I'm assuming, mostly from Connecticut, probably other surrounding New England states. You kind of want to keep it geographically. You know,
I suppose that makes sense. It's a lot wetter here than it is in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so it sounds like on that, we're all in agreement that that should go forward and that will be useful. I mean, obviously, the issue of how the mathematical formula is structured, I mean, that has to be addressed too. You know, I don't, anyway. Okay. So as I understand it, and you guys can correct me, you're not able to start side streaming at the cheese company until presumably you get the ARPA funds and can install
Yes.
the equipment, because that equipment, and then I don't know whether to meet the federal approval for the cheese making, that's what you need. You're currently collecting, because you're under a totally different regulatory framework, you're beginning to side stream at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
So Same
Um,
question. And what's the lead time on that equipment once you are able to purchase it? Do you know?
Provided I can get some confirmation, even if the funds are just distributed, I could, once I have confirmation, I might be able to get some money from some investors to
Sure.
go forward with it prior to the funds being out there.
Sure.
But I could have the whole thing installed within 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
Once we have the funds. If we don't get the funds and we're levied these almost $4,000 a month, $4,000 a month right now, I will, I'll go work for another cheese company.
Right, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Do you know sort of offhand what the amount requested for that? equipment?
In order for us to, we're talking
Okay.
a very simple point A to point B, stainless steel tubing and some lime to be able to clean it is $18,000 currently. Yeah, just shy of 18.
Because, yeah, I mean, I would much rather have the money spent on solving the problem than, charging. But on the other hand, I do agree with Harry that, and we were all very cognizant of COVID going on and all the impacts that were occurring. But this has been going on for quite a while.
About 2 years.
Which, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is as long as I've been on this board. Dave's been here far longer than me.
I've got to say, most of the time it was a lot more boring than this.
That you guys would take boring at this point, right?
Yeah, certainly.
As a small business owner of the last 3 years, boring would be awesome.
Yes.
We did, somebody went over and asked the Stonington water pollution people about it, and they had heard nothing about it.
Because we're not really a blip on the radar. We're so far away from a plant there as well, and I went through the initial.
Very deal smaller.
Yep, yeah, we're about half the size over there, and then on top of that, I went through the same process I did with Christian Lund, Mr. Lund here at the beginning, and he said, as long as we have a place where we can come in and do a grab sample, we're good to go. And we're, like I said, the very end of the sewage treatment line. So, there's stories that I've heard. We're in the American Velvet Mill, where they used to call the Velvet Mill and say, turn on the water, we got to push everything down the line. So, that's as far as we've, dealt with them, which is great.
Interesting, yeah.
Okay, so one thing I'm wondering, and Harry, I guess I'd like your input or Greg's, is if there's side streaming efforts being begun. I mean, there were 2 samplings done that both had very high numbers. And we've talked about and are very cognizant of the fact that, there is the combined effluent coming out, and so there's no way to distinguish whose it is. I'm wondering if it would make sense to do another sampling in some weeks' time and see whether the numbers seem to be any lower than, the second time was really higher than the first time. Harry, you have any thoughts on that?
We can do more sampling if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So, because the other issue for Dave and Laura and I is the lawyer's letter essentially said, 60 days for a plan, which you all did, and thank you very much. We appreciate that. We're really not looking to drive you all out of Groton, but on the other hand, we were, after 2 years, looking to get the situation to move forward and not just continue. But then there was 60 days to implement the plan. And it sounds like clearly for you, given the time frame that Greg just outlined for the ARPA funding, at least for Mystic Cheese, it sounds like it's unlikely that 60 days after whatever that date was.
It's about August 20.
It's August,
Yeah,
yeah.
August 20 something.
They're still looking for money.
So-
Correct,
I
yeah.
guess I would be interested to hear from Laura and Dave whether we want to leave things as they are or potentially, and Greg and Harry could certainly comment too, or that we, consider there to be a good effort being made and that we delay the additional charges till the ARPA funding decisions are made and then they can implement and have sort of a time frame based on the ARPA funding.
Well, the charges, there's a substantial charges being made now.
It's not substantial. Right now, we're paying kind of base rates, I believe.
They're
paying based
paying
industrial.
now based on their water usage, but just at the regular
Oh,
rate.
so the,
This formula with the additional charge hasn't been implemented.
that's great.
Numbers, yes.
Yeah, and you are also not paying premium.
I'm not paying the advanced surcharge, no, but I am paying the standard industrial charge for the
Based on
town.
water use.
Yeah, I pay the bill that comes in, we
Exactly.
send the check right back out.
I see, so we do need to, get this thing settled, so we can get more money.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to work to adjust our expectation in terms of the timeline.
Okay, Greg, any comments?
No, I think it might be a good idea if they are, in fact, doing some side streaming now, to do some testing. See if we are getting some better numbers, and if we are, then you're gonna have to make a decision probably tonight if you want to extend the date. It's really coming up on August 23rd. I don't think you want to have a special meeting
No.
to do that.
Well, the lawyer guys have set 2 months. As a-
That's what we told them.
Yeah.
It's up to you to tell them what to write, so you can extend it.
So we still get to say,
Yes, we could revise based on what we've heard. We could revise our expectations of when the additional charges would be started.
yeah. Well, as far as the cheese business, I hate to put it this way, but it sounds to me like you won't need to do anything unless you get a boot in the hind end
I don't
by
think that's fair.
somebody saying there's a deadline.
Dave, I don't
after
think that's
this.
fair.
Huh?
I don't think that's fair at all. Here we are sitting here. There's been tremendous progress made by both of these gentlemen.
I'm not talking about intentions. I'm talking about economic incentives. You have an economic incentive if we say at X time, a charge is gonna start happening.
Mhm.
And if you're talking to your investors and wanting them to invest money in it, to tell them there is a hammer, isn't that going to encourage them to say, yes, we're going to do it?
$18,000 right now is a lot of money for us and for my investors. I understand your point entirely. I don't have that kind of money available at present time. If we have $4,000 worth of charges a month, I'm not going to go into arrears with the town. That would be a horrible thing to do. I don't want my name slandered. So I would cease producing. I would cease producing cheese. I would sell what I have until the time where I can make more cheese.
Well, what I'm trying to ask is, do you have any incentive to do something?
Yeah,
What
I
is
mean,
your incentive?
if as long as I can fix the situation and perform the side streaming tasks, I'm able to continue working in the cheese industry for my company.
I'm sorry, this side streaming thing is not the thing that's gonna cost $18,000.
It is, sir, yes.
Yeah, okay, so you are, in order to get things right, somebody needs to put up the 18K and,
Correct.
yeah. So I'm a little concerned with their,
So Dave, I think this is addressing what you're concerned about, but you can tell me if I'm not. So they requested the 18,000 for them is for installation of stainless steel piping and so forth that's required by the federal government for them to, meet the standards for the cheese making. They requested that money from the town ARPA funding.
oh, you did?
We did, yes, we submitted an application.
That funding Greg thought would be decided by the end of this year.
Uh-huh.
So my suggestion was that we, I don't know if we need to ask the lawyers to send something different, presumably, that we make the change in the rates that they would be paying to this increased rate, that would now occur some period of time, like 2 months or 3 months, something, after the ARPA funding decisions are finalized.
Okay.
Okay, so the incentive would be there that they would still get hit with those higher rates if they did nothing. And we can always reconsider if for some reason the ARPA funding doesn't come through, but.
So you're saying if case number one, the ARPA funding does come through, then they have 2 months to
Well, they need some time to then buy the equipment and get it installed.
square away. And then, so we don't charge them anything until.
Well,
everything-
we
They are
just
paid.
charge them based on the water usage,
Based
but
on
not
water.
the increased rate based on the BOD and COD.
Okay, fine, that's case one. Case two, ARPA doesn't come through, then what?
I would leave Groton. I would relocate my cheese vendor.
Really?
And,
Yes, sir.
but we've already been told that the ARPA funding is.
Pretty likely, because sewer, very likely,
Very likely.
because sewer was one of the priorities for the ARPA, for the national bill.
Yeah, okay, well, okay, good.
Okay, so I think we'll still have the incentive there, but what I'm proposing is that we delay the increased charges until, instead of 60 days after they submitted the plan, until whatever we decide, 2 or 3 months after the ARPA funding decisions.
So we allow 60 days after the ARPA funding
He
comes,
said 2 or 3 months, depending on what we
and
decide.
that'll be enough time for you to get all your
Yeah,
funding done, yeah, okay.
And,
So it's 2 or 3 months.
well, we can decide what the motion is. I'm happy that, I'm willing to go 3 months. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
We've
too?
already begun, and I
Right.
also applied for ARPA funds to make
Right.
my process easier,
Sure.
more efficient, but we've already begun. And then I do have to note, so the Weston Sampson testing, as well as best management practices, we're beginning to work down that list. They will be revisiting my facility to do testing under Connecticut DEEP grant funding that they've allocated to us. So I should have better results. I don't have a specific date yet, but it sounds like some point in September, they should be back to do the testing.
And as an aside, is your experience with this informing your colleagues?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So what
interesting.
they're doing is the grant funding through Deep and Connie Mendolia is a saint up there, very helpful with the P2 program. They're going to come up with best management practices for us to distribute to our colleagues throughout the state. So it'll be a state paper
Great.
right on the Deep website.
Okay.
Yep.
So to summarize, you expect in 2 or 3 months you will be golden.
I'm never going to say golden because I don't know until I know, right? So I won't make any promises that I can't absolutely say it will be 100%. And as I said earlier, there is no way I will ever get my effluent below the surcharge rates that are here. It's not going to happen, and I'm happy to pay my fair share. I'm happy to pay my fair share. I just need to make it reasonable for business.
Yeah, how much do you think you will be paying if things go well?
So, I mean, there's certainly a lot of speculation, and I have to make sure that my team does everything right, but I'm hoping to be able to reduce my effluent rates by, anywhere from 50 to 70% as far as the strength of it goes, because right now the highest strength happens to be the lowest volume of what's going down the drain. So it's very easily captured. I mean, I say easily, I'm not the one personally doing it, it's my team right now. But it's easily captured and then side streamed to become energy up in Southington.
Yeah.
So when Deep or Weston Sampson comes and does the sampling, are they sampling somehow just your facility as
Correct.
opposed to the combined?
So what they've done is they've isolated all the floor drains throughout my facility, which essentially just doesn't capture the toilets and the hand wash sinks. So they're capturing that with multiple samplers throughout the facility so that they can do it over a couple of days. So that's what they did the first time, and that's what I expect.
So are they routinely sampling it now? Or are they just
No.
one
So
time?
it was a period of a week. They came out and they deployed these samplers in all the floor drains so that they could capture all the different processes. And they provided me with a report. And now they provided me with the best practices that's in that paper in front of you. We're going to implement as many as we feasibly can with the idea to start really reducing what our impact is on wastewater treatment.
And then they'll test it once more, and that'll be the.
That won't be it. Hopefully this is a never-ending process, right? Sustainability is important, and we want to make sure that we're good partners in the community. And I have to note, yes, it has been ongoing for 2 years. Obviously, we all know what happened over the last 2 years. So financially strapped and just trying to make sure we pivot our business so we can retail and make sure we get beer to the people. So yes. Have I been on top of it the whole time? Through research, yes. Through implementation, no.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is 6:20 now. So I'm gonna make a motion that we ask the lawyer to send I don't know what it should be called, a revision that indicates that this, we think the plans that have been presented look good. That the revision would be, instead of, them having to implement those plans in 60 days, that they need to implement those plans in 90 days after the Groton Town ARPA funding decisions are made.
And I will second that motion.
Thank you.
After revise the time that for them to increase the charges.
The increased charges would not start till 90 days after the town's ARPA funding decisions.
Yeah, I see, okay.
Okay?
And
Is
these,
That's amicable.
These-
Absolutely.
these are the decisions of the towns to make.
Correct.
Yeah, the town council has to vote on the funding.
Mhm.
Does that is it anything, okay, is that, all right, so what we need to vote, we have, sorry,
You've approved their plans.
approved their plans.
And you're just asking for an extension of implementation
Yeah.
for 90 days beyond.
And
You have all that, Melissa?
if everything goes well, we're done, but
Well,
It may or may
it's an
not.
ongoing thing. It's gonna be continuing, then,
We can,
ultimately they should probably get a flow meter. too.
Well, that's part of my ARPA application is a manual in the parking lot that segregates my waste from Brian's so that I can actually measure what's going down. Because while I bring in several 100,000 gallons of water every month, I'm not sending several 100,000 gallons of water down the drain. It's going out the door as beer and absorbed in the grain. It goes to the cattle and through evaporation when we boil it for an hour.
What percentage of the?
It's so, 477,000 gallons this year so far through the first 7 months came in. And out of that, 310,000 went down the drain. So it's not all of it going out the door, but it's a good amount.
Well, it's more like a quarter.
Yep, absolutely,
Becoming beer.
absolutely.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yep.
Whatever it is, okay.
Okay, so I made a motion, Laura seconded, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so it passed unanimously.
Yeah.
Do we need to make a motion around, I think you should do some testing. I mean, if you want to share the testing results that you get, that would be great. That could be helpful
It's
to
cost savings.
the folks here, but do we need to make a motion to have Harry do more testing? He can just,
Yeah, we'll just go do that.
you can just go do that.
Yep.
Okay, does that cover everything about this situation? Is there anything I left out?
Nope.
Okay,
Rate study's ongoing.
right, the rate study is ongoing, and so we'll see what that is, and, it sounds like that's on sort of a similar time frame with
Yeah,
the town ARPA funding,
Yep.
so that, once we should have the rate study results, the ARPA fund results are in a similar time to then be able to address anything that comes out of either of those.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, does that work? And then, so, thank you very much. I appreciate your coming. I do think it's important that we get this, moving and not have it hanging out there. We were very conscious of, what COVID was doing to these
And we certainly.
businesses. And so,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
part of why you didn't hear anything like that letter from the lawyers until, we sort of felt like things were maybe not back to normal, but at least less off kilter.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I thank you again for your time and efforts, and, hopefully we can make this situation work well for everybody.
We hope so.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So now we'll go back to our regularly scheduled.
The boring stuff, right?
The boring stuff, like approving the minutes from last meeting.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
everybody's time, and it's nice to meet
Thank
you.
you.
If you guys have any other further questions, I was looking for a business card, of course,
Yeah.
in my vehicle. But I can keep Aaron@beardbrewing.com. by all means.
Thanks, Max.
If you ever want a tour to see how we make cheese or
We love your
where the
cheese.
waste goes, wherever, you're more than welcome to come by.
Thank you.
Great,
That might be a fun thing to do. We threw the sewage plant about it.
You better want that tour.
Where the sewage comes from.
You guys have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Have a good
one.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
okay, so, I think hopefully we can move through the rest of things fairly quickly. So, we have the minutes from the June 14th, 2022 meeting. I read them through, I didn't have any comments.
So I would move to approve.
Okay, Dave, Laura moved to approve the minutes.
I move to approve, sure.
You'll second. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so the minutes are approved. Okay, so the next, we don't have consultant reports, anything on sewer use, attorney report, so we're on the public works director.
I don't have a lot, other than, we did have the interviews for the mechanic position.
I didn't see a monthly report for this. Usually it comes.
It's
in my
in
emails.
It was in the
Agenda packet,
agenda
It was.
packet.
actually the 2 months,
Seems to have gotten
June and July.
Here,
You didn't get the agenda packet?
in my email.
It's there. I printed it all out. Would you like my copies?
Have you got an extra copy?
No, but I'm happy to share.
Well, oh, that extra? Or this, you need this back?
No, it's okay.
Oh,
I
okay.
have it on file.
Okay, sorry,
Then also, Hugh, if you could, this is the resolution for the sewer fees. The town clerk had asked for a signed copy,
okay,
so if you could just,
some copy, but that's fine.
so I can give that to her, so it's official. Thank you. Like I said, we're, making an offer this week to a gentleman for the mechanic position, so if that'll go well, we'll still have the operation supervisor open, and who knows when we'll ever fill that. Really all I had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the facility report, Harry, you want to run us through that?
Sure. So the report is included in the meeting agenda. Greg just talked about the open positions. The plant is performing as well as it normally does. We meet our permit on all counts. Nitrogen was even a little lower this month at 103 pounds per day, which is one of our lower, I think maybe our lowest day, our lowest month ever, rather. Sludge production seems to be up a little. We're still hauling out a few extra trucks a week. I think maybe I'm thinking maybe it's the warm weather, but hard to say. I think that's about it for the plant report.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's see. So I don't have a chairman's report, but I would like to just thank both Harry and Greg for the efforts they've put into not just the usual run of things, but also addressing these issues with the brewery and the cheese company. It is good to have that, have some forward motion now. And y'all had put in some significant amount of work around that, so.
Yeah.
Did you attend the committee of the chairs meeting that they had?
I did, and so mostly I just noted the, that we, unlike all the other committees, we obviously have the responsibility for setting the sewer rate, and so sort of the overseeing of the treatment plant and setting the sewer rate were our major activities. And I just mentioned that, we were having to, the one sort of unusual topic we've been dealing with was the high strength sewage coming from the brewery and the cheese factory. I had totally forgotten about that.
I don't know if it was well attended or not.
There were at least a half dozen committees represented.
They may try to do more. I know they used to do that quite a bit. They may
Right.
do that more often.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done old business, so we have new business, we have a sewer refund. If there was information on that, I missed that. No.
Talking about 97 Somerset.
Yeah,
So that is a house that had a fire some time ago, I would say almost a year. And they called to see if there was anything they could do about the sewer use. I'm not sure what the status of the house use is. I know it's undergoing rehabilitation now, and I know that the sewer's not capped, but it is uninhabitable.
so did they request a refund?
Yes, the executor of the estate, and I don't have her name in front of me, contacted me and asked if that is something that could be done.
Okay. But sorry, let me ask, I thought it had to be capped in order for us, is that?
That's my interpretation, yeah.
I think that was in the ordinance or something, right?
So why didn't they cap it?
Well, I mean, capping, I don't know why they haven't capped it. They are working on it, and I presume at some point it'll be put back into use. But I have no logical answer as to why they haven't capped it.
Okay, could we handle this by telling them that, or them being told that it needs to be capped, and if it's capped, then, we would certainly
Okay,
read a request for refund,
Yep.
although, I don't, it was in the ordinance, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It's in the ordinance.
So, I'm not sure we can refund, and I think we can only refund starting when they cap, if I remember how it's written, but I don't remember the
Okay.
exact.
all right, I will convey that.
Okay,
Yes.
we don't need a motion around that, right?
No.
Yeah, okay. Any other business?
Nope.
Then I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? That's all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Right here.